Lincoln family searching for closure after a son, father, and friend was killed. It's our other top story tonight. The family mourning after a loved one was murdered in downtown Lincoln over the weekend. Channel 8's Mackenzie Johnson was at a candlelight vigil for him tonight. Mackenzie, how is the family doing?
The street was quiet. Just after 2 a.m., headlights flickered down the block, cutting through the darkness. Most of the neighborhood was asleep, except for two friends parked in a car, laughing, talking, just killing time after a night out. But within seconds, that calm snapped. Gunfire. Loud. Repetitive. Closer than anyone could process. The windshield shattered. A figure slumped over the driver's seat. Blood pooled under the door as screams pierced the silence. Sirens wailed in the distance, but they were already too late. By the time the sun rose over Lincoln, Nebraska, the life of a rising artist, an internet-famous rapper, model, and new father, was gone. Not from overdose, not from fame getting out of hand, not from the risks that come with the industry. He was gunned down while sitting in his car, after spending the evening with family. This wasn't a sketchy alley. There was no club drama, and no one saw it coming. So what did happen? Who pulled the trigger? And why? Was this a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or did someone want him silenced? And what if he wasn't even the target? Have you ever seen a situation flip from chill to chaos in a matter of seconds? Drop your experience in the comments, because this one's gonna leave you stunned. What started as a laid-back night turned into a story that still has people whispering across social media, across states, and asking the same question: was it random, or was it personal? If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world. Saiveon Hopkins was 23 years old. Online, he went by the name Jay Hefner, a nod perhaps to the lifestyle he projected. Sleek fashion, smooth bars, and a confidence that lit up every frame. To the outside world, he looked like a man on the rise, a model with a defined jawline and gym-honed physique. A rapper with hooks that gained traction on TikTok and Instagram. An OnlyFans creator with a bold, unfiltered side that built him a devoted following. But offline, life was a different story. While followers saw the jewelry and studio lights, behind the scenes, Saiveon was navigating the pressures of young fatherhood. He'd recently become a veneer technician, training hard to break into the dental aesthetics industry. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And that stability was exactly what he wanted for his daughter. Because for all the cameras and comments, Saiveon was also a son, a brother, a father, and most importantly, a caregiver. His mother was sick. Long-term illness had kept her mostly homebound. And it was Saiveon who often helped her get through the day. Between studio sessions and content shoots, he was at home changing diapers, prepping meals, running errands. He talked about her often on social media, but not in a way that sought sympathy. It was just real life. He didn't flaunt hardship. He just handled it. That was Jay Hefner, caught between the demands of a fast-moving digital world and the steady, slow pressure of responsibility. On Instagram, he posed in designer jeans, gold chains, flashing smiles. In real life, he worked long hours, missed sleep, and picked up extra shifts for rent. Some of his friends described him as a hustler in the best way, someone who could adapt, build a brand, flip an opportunity. Others said he was loyal to a fault, someone who would give you the last of what he had if you needed it. But that duality came with tension, because not everyone was comfortable with how quickly he rose. He was making a name for himself in multiple lanes: fashion, music, adult content, and now the dental world. And not everyone liked the boldness or the attention. In some circles, that kind of shine draws envy. Still, Saiveon wasn't trying to flex just for clout. Those who knew him say he genuinely wanted to create a better life, not just for himself, but for his family. He wanted his daughter to grow up with more than he had. He talked about getting his own house one day, about opening his own business, about walking away from the adult industry once he'd saved enough. It's easy to reduce someone to persona, to look at followers and views and make assumptions. But underneath all the filters and fashion was a young man trying to balance two worlds. One that demanded performance and one that needed presence. On the night he died, he had just dropped his daughter off at home. He was hanging out with a friend. No flashy party, no trouble. Just two people in a car catching up. That's what makes this story so painful. Not because Saiveon was perfect, but because he was trying to grow, trying to survive, trying to show his daughter a different path. And now that path has been cut short. In the hours following his death, tributes poured in. Photos, lyrics, videos. Messages from fans who'd never met him, but felt they knew him. From friends who'd stayed up with him in the studio, from family members now facing a future missing a piece. His story wasn't supposed to end in a parked car, but maybe that's why people still talk about him, not just for how he died, but for how he lived. For the complexity, for the hustle, for the heart. It was supposed to be a quiet visit, just a family celebration in Lincoln, Nebraska. Jay Hefner, born Saiveon Hopkins, had returned to his hometown for a simple reason: to celebrate his cousin's birthday. Nothing extravagant, just some time with the people who knew him long before the Instagram followers and Spotify streams. The kind of night that felt normal, grounding. He wasn't there to perform. He wasn't hosting a party. He was home, among family. But by the time the sun came up on September 8th, 2024, that sense of peace was shattered. The night had carried on like most gatherings do. Laughter, food, conversations that stretched too long. Sometime after midnight, Jay stepped outside with a close friend. They got into a car to the party spot, just two people catching a breather. From all accounts, there was nothing unusual about it. No loud music, no shouting, just calm. That changed quickly. Nearby, a confrontation had begun to bubble up. Reports say it started as an argument. Loud voices, some pushing, some threats. Tension built fast. And one of the people involved? Jay's cousin, the same family member whose birthday he was there to celebrate. What happened next wasn't premeditated. There was no long pause or dramatic lead-up. According to witnesses, Jay saw the dispute intensifying and stepped in to protect his cousin. Some say he tried to de-escalate it. Others say he simply put himself between his cousin and danger. Either way, it was an instinctive move. The kind you make when someone you love is at risk. But that moment changed everything. Gunfire erupted. Multiple shots, loud, chaotic, in quick succession. In the scramble, it was hard to tell how many shooters there were or where the bullets were coming from. People ducked, screamed, ran. But in the aftermath, one fact was undeniable. Jay had been hit. Several times. The young man who had traveled across state lines to celebrate a birthday now lay bleeding inside a car. His friend called for help. Paramedics rushed in. The scene was swarmed with flashing lights. But despite their efforts, Jay's injuries were too severe. At 5:40 a.m., he was pronounced dead at the hospital. Just hours earlier, he had been hugging family, laughing, living. Now that parking lot was a crime scene. The celebration had become a tragedy, and a mother, daughter, and entire community were left with a gaping hole. As investigators arrived, they began trying to piece together what had gone so horribly wrong. But to those who knew Jay, the bigger question wasn't just how, but why. He wasn't looking for trouble. He didn't come to town to start anything. In fact, he was weeks away from new job opportunities and expanding his content brand. He had responsibilities, big ones, and people relying on him back home. Stepping into a fight wasn't part of the plan. But family meant everything to him, and that loyalty, what made him beloved, also made him vulnerable. It's moments like these that leave us torn, because doing the right thing sometimes comes at a cost. And in Jay's case, it came suddenly, without warning, in the city where he first dreamed of making something more of his life. By the morning of September 8th, the news had started to spread, first through whispers, then in phone calls, and finally across social media. The kind of posts that make people pause and reread. Not because they didn't understand, but because they couldn't believe. Jay Hefner is gone. For most fans, the shock was immediate. They had just seen him post hours earlier, smiling, sharing music, teasing upcoming content. His face was still fresh on their feeds. But for those who truly knew Saiveon Hopkins, the grief hit somewhere deeper. It wasn't about losing a rising star. It was about losing their person. A son, a partner, a father. The first public wave of mourning came from his girlfriend, Maddie Murchison. She didn't hold back. Through a series of emotionally raw posts on Instagram, she painted a picture of a relationship built on dreams and plans for the future. You weren't just my love. You were my best friend. We were supposed to do everything together. You promised you'd always protect us. I still have your voice messages. I still smell your cologne on our pillow. I still don't believe this is real." Her grief wasn't filtered. She talked about raising their daughter without him, about the photos he never got to take, and the bed that now felt colder than any winter night. Her words, often shared through trembling video snippets and handwritten notes, resonated with thousands, many of whom had followed their relationship through social media. "Our daughter will grow up knowing how much you loved her. I would give anything to hear your laugh just one more time. You died a hero, and that's how you'll live in our hearts." Back in Lincoln, the pain extended beyond his inner circle. His mother, already battling terminal illness, had now lost her son. The weight of it all, watching her child succeed, then burying him before her own time, was too much. Family members described her as shattered beyond words. The kind of heartbreak that can't be patched by sympathy cards or flowers. Jay wasn't just her pride. He was her caretaker, her provider. He worked odd jobs in between music gigs to help with her medications. He'd skip out on social events just to run errands for her. His success wasn't about money or fame, it was about making sure she was okay. And now she had to mourn the very person who made her feel safe. His friends didn't know what to say. Some took to Facebook and TikTok to vent their anger. Others posted throwback pictures, laughing through tears, clinging to the version of Jay they could still hear in their heads. But it wasn't just family and friends who felt the loss. The online community reacted instantly. Within 24 hours, hashtags like Justice for Jay and Long Live Jay Hefner began trending across platforms. Fans from cities Jay had never even visited were posting tributes. He wasn't just talented, he was real, raw, honest. "I followed him for the music, but I stayed for his heart." A GoFundMe page was launched, initially to support funeral costs and to help Maddie care for their daughter. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, not just from fans, but from fellow artists, influencers, and even strangers who were moved by Jay's story. The page wasn't just about money. It became a digital memorial, filled with heartfelt comments. "You didn't deserve this. Fly high, King. Your music lives on, but we miss your soul. Rest easy, Jay. Your fight wasn't in vain." The city of Lincoln itself responded with quiet devastation. This wasn't LA or Atlanta. They weren't used to losing someone on the rise in such a violent public way. Local artists held tribute nights. Youth groups organized peace marches. Murals began popping up on buildings he used to walk past as a kid. Because Jay wasn't just famous, he was familiar. He was the guy who came back home even when he didn't have to. He was the cousin who showed up to birthdays. The neighbor who remembered your name. The son who never let his mother feel forgotten. The father who left plans on his kitchen table for a future now rewritten in loss. And this is the cruelty of public tragedy. The world mourns a star, but those closest to him are left mourning the person behind the image. To fans, he was Jay Hefner. To Maddie, he was just Vay. To his daughter, he was supposed to be her first hero. And to his mother, he was the reason she held on. In the wake of Saiveon Hopkins' death, Lincoln, Nebraska was left reeling. Not just with the grief of losing a young life, but with the urgency of answering one question. Who was responsible for taking him, and why? The shooting took place in the early hours of September 8, 2024. But even now, weeks later, police have yet to make a public arrest or provide definitive answers. The investigation has unfolded in fits and starts, with authorities working to piece together the puzzle of a night that started innocently, but ended tragically. At the core of the investigation lies the question of the shooter's identity. Was it someone Saiveon knew personally? Or was he simply an unlucky victim of random violence? While some close to Saiveon suggest the incident may have been connected to a larger dispute involving his cousin, no concrete evidence has yet surfaced to confirm or deny this theory. The lack of a clear suspect and the absence of any official statements from law enforcement has left many to speculate. But the absence of a suspect doesn't mean that there hasn't been activity behind the scenes. According to police, surveillance footage from nearby businesses is being reviewed. However, initial reports from law enforcement indicate that the footage has not provided any clear leads yet. In the days following the shooting, investigators canvassed the area, looking for witnesses, collecting physical evidence, and following up on leads that have so far remained cold. Despite these efforts, the shooting remains unsolved. One key question is whether this was a random act of violence or something far more personal. Given Saiveon's rising visibility, some have speculated that he may have been targeted because of his growing social media influence and his association with high-profile figures. With his appearance on OnlyFans and his growing success in multiple industries, Saiveon's profile had elevated him to a level where he was known to many. Some wonder if this made him a target of jealousy, or worse, retaliation. Could someone have taken matters into their own hands because they felt wronged by him? Could it be that the violence wasn't about Saiveon at all, but something deeper, something tied to the circles he moved in? On the other hand, the theory of mistaken identity is another angle being explored by law enforcement. Some believe that Saiveon's killing could have been the result of a case of misidentification. The shooting occurred in a neighborhood known for its higher-than-average criminal activity, and it's possible that the shooter was aiming at someone else entirely. It's a theory that police are continuing to explore, though it remains speculative for now. If Saiveon was indeed mistaken for another person, it would add a layer of tragedy to an already senseless act. A more disturbing possibility is the idea of premeditation. Was this planned, or did the violence erupt in the heat of a confrontation? According to friends who spoke to authorities, there had been some tension in the area earlier in the evening, but no one could have predicted that things would escalate to the point of violence. Saiveon, known for his calm demeanor and his protective nature, might have gotten caught up in something he hadn't anticipated. What started as an effort to shield his cousin from harm could have cost him his life. If this was the case, it raises the chilling question of whether someone had been waiting for the right moment to strike, knowing full well that Saiveon's good intentions would put him in harm's way. And then, there's the unsettling possibility that this was a random act of violence. A senseless, unprovoked killing born out of the chaotic unpredictability that often defines urban violence. In cities across the country, random shootings have become disturbingly common, as young men, often with little to lose, resort to violence for reasons that no one can fully understand. It's a dark, grim reality for many in areas where gun violence has become an almost daily occurrence. Saiveon, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, might have been nothing more than another statistic in a much larger, more tragic story. But as the days pass, the answers remain elusive. There are still more questions than answers, and each theory only opens up new lines of investigation without providing clear conclusions. As law enforcement works tirelessly to uncover the truth, the community of Lincoln and Saiveon's family remains left in limbo, hoping for justice but fearing the possibility that the truth may never be revealed. What if this wasn't random at all? What if someone had been watching him, tracking his movements, waiting for an opportunity to strike? Was Saiveon a casualty of something much darker, something lurking beneath the surface that no one could have predicted? For now, all they have are unanswered questions. And as the investigation continues, Saiveon's family and friends are left to wonder if they'll ever get the closure they so desperately need. Saiveon Hopkins' story is more than a crime report. It's a reflection of a painful truth reverberating through communities across America. A young black man who was doing everything society tells us is right, building a career, caring for family, expanding his skills, and protecting the people he loved, was gunned down in a moment of chaos. He was only 23. What's most devastating is how common this kind of loss has become. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death for black males aged 15 to 34 in the United States. According to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Black Americans are 10 times more likely to die from gun-related violence than their white counterparts. And for many of those victims, their stories don't even make headlines. But Saiveon's did. Not just because of who he was, but because of how much he represented. He wasn't just Jay Hefner, the charismatic model and content creator with a confident swagger and millions of eyes on his every post. He was also a son, a caregiver, a new father, and someone who had recently invested in a completely different trade, becoming a veneer technician. Behind the tattoos, designer clothes, and club appearances was a man juggling multiple identities, all rooted in survival and aspiration. He lived what many would call a double life, not in deception, but in complexity. He was both the product and the provider, building a brand in front of the camera while wiping tears behind closed doors. In public, he was bold, unfiltered, and unapologetic. In private, he was dutiful, grounded, and deeply loyal to his family. It's a balancing act many young men are forced to master, especially those growing up in environments where success can be a target, not a shield. And that's where the silence becomes deafening. There is an emotional tax for men like Saiveon, expected to be strong, never show fear, never falter, never stop grinding. The unspoken code says vulnerability is weakness. But what happens when that code isolates rather than protects? What's often missing from the national conversation is the rising violence faced by Black creatives and influencers, particularly those carving space in non-traditional industries like entertainment, social media, and adult content. These individuals are increasingly vulnerable to envy, exploitation, and sudden harm, especially when their image is tied to visibility and money. It's the paradox of modern fame. The higher you climb, the more visible your flaws and your threats. Saiveon didn't just lose his life. The world lost a voice, a father, a son, a dreamer. A man who was trying to break generational cycles and take care of the people who depended on him. And now, his daughter will grow up without him. His mother, battling terminal illness, has to grieve her child while preparing to say goodbye to life herself. His girlfriend, Madi, is left holding the memories of a future they planned but never got to live. What remains is a legacy frozen in time. A name that will live in hashtags, reposted tributes, and whispered conversations about how unfair life can be. But there's a lesson here, one that should echo louder than the gunshots that took him. This tragedy calls on all of us to ask harder questions about the environments we create, the pressures we place on young men, and the complacency around violence in our communities. If someone like Saiveon, who is giving his all to stay focused, stay grounded, and stay present, can still be taken, then what chance do others have? Saiveon Hopkins, a young man full of promise, was caught between two worlds: the glamorous life of a rising social media star and the quiet, grounded existence of a devoted son and father. He had dreams, not just for himself, but for his family. In the blink of an eye, those dreams were extinguished. Saiveon's life was on the brink of something extraordinary. As an OnlyFans creator, model, and rapper, he had captured the attention of thousands. His unique blend of charm, ambition, and creativity had made him a rising star. But behind that carefully curated public persona was a man who cared deeply for his family. Someone who, despite his success, remained grounded in his responsibilities. He was the primary caregiver to his ill mother, and his love for his newborn daughter was unwavering. Saiveon was more than just a social media presence. He was a protector, a provider, a constant source of support to those he loved. But in the end, it was that very instinct to protect that led to his untimely death. Saiveon, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, intervened in an altercation to protect his cousin. What should have been a simple act of loyalty and love turned tragic as gunshots shattered the calm of the night. The emotional weight of this loss is felt most deeply by those who loved him. His girlfriend, Maddie Murchison, shared a heart-wrenching tribute on social media, writing, "He was my safe place." In a world that often feels unpredictable and chaotic, Saiveon was her rock, a source of comfort and stability. To lose that, to lose him, has left an unfillable void in her life. For her and for others close to him, Saiveon was more than just a figure on a screen. He was someone real, someone who mattered. The connection they shared wasn't defined by public recognition or followers. It was rooted in love and trust. As we reflect on the final moments of Saiveon's life, the contrast between the joy he must have felt earlier in the night and the sudden violence that unfolded is striking. The evening began like any other. Two friends sitting in a car, sharing conversation, perhaps laughing. But within moments, that laughter was drowned out by the deafening sound of gunshots. The bright headlights of the car that once illuminated the quiet street were replaced by the flashing red and blue of emergency lights. The joy of the evening was erased, replaced by chaos, and the world lost someone who had so much more to give. We can only hope that in Saiveon's memory, the conversation around violence, especially the violence that takes the lives of young Black men, artists, and creatives, will continue. His story is a painful reminder that we need to protect the people who are working hard to carve out their futures. We need to do better for those who are trying to make something of themselves, not just as a society, but as individuals too. Saiveon's light burned too fast, but it's a light that will not be easily forgotten.